The storyline here is pretty familiar for this type of situation. Lately, I've been reading a few tales on this theme and felt the need to offer a perspective from the husband's side, addressing the excuses often given for a wife's actions. I do my best with spell check and proofreading, but I'll admit, a few mistakes might slip through the cracks. If that's something you can't overlook, you might want to skip ahead. My wife and I both work at the same marketing firm. Sarah is a client relationship ambassador. Don't ask me to explain what that actually means, because to this day, I'm not entirely sure what her job involves other than keeping clients happy. I'm Mike, and I lead the IT teams. Life was going pretty smoothly for us. We were both employed and content, knee-deep in renovations on our fixer-upper, and raising two awesome kids, Mia, who's 13, and Ben, who's 11. We lived close to our families and were part of a tight-knit group of friends. We're both in our mid-30s and seemed like a good match, though she definitely wins in the looks department. Sarah stands at 5 feet 9 inches with long blonde hair and striking blue eyes. She claims she's got some Swedish heritage, and she's got that tall, leggy Scandinavian look to back it up. She's bright, full of energy, and always on the go. I'm a few inches taller with sandy hair. I'm more into endurance sports like cycling and running, so I've got a lean build. I'm in good shape, just not in that muscle-bound gym rat kind of way. I was taken aback when I got an invite for a long weekend on a private island owned by one of our firm's clients, Jack Edwards. Our CEO explained that he and his wife, Karen, along with a couple of directors and their partners, would be going too. Sarah was invited because she was the primary contact for this client. It felt like I was just there to round out the numbers. But hey, who turns down a free trip? Jack mentioned that this client was filthy rich and easily our biggest account. We'd be leaving early Friday and coming back Monday on a private charter with everything covered. Sarah already knew about it when I brought it up on our drive home. She'd been working with the client for months, was clearly impressed, and couldn't wait for the freebie weekend. I asked her about the plans, but she didn't seem to have many details, so I asked her about the client. Sarah said his name was William Preston, guessed he was in his late 40s. Good-looking, confident, and heir to a family fortune. She seemed a bit dazzled, describing him as powerful and in control, among other things. Great, I thought. He sounds like a real arrogant jerk, but I figured I'd keep that thought to myself until after the weekend. 2 weeks later, we were on a private charter plane early Friday morning. I've got to admit, I was impressed. If the island was really all his, this guy must be loaded. I didn't know what to expect, but the island was massive, maybe 5 miles long and a couple of miles wide from what we could see as we came into land. It looked like a 5-star resort, with the main building nestled behind a white sandy bay shaped like a perfect crescent. Sarah was thrilled, and the rest of us weren't far behind her. We were shown to our rooms, and then went out to meet our host for lunch on a veranda overlooking the bay. I wanted to dislike him, but William came across as pretty down to earth. If anything, Sarah had undersold his looks. He had a bit of that George Clooney charm. He thanked us all for coming and told us to make ourselves at home. We mingled with the other 3 couples from our firm and met a stunning brunette named Charlotte, who I figured was William's date for the weekend. Aside from the staff, there was only one other guy who seemed like security, lurking in the background without any introduction. I started wondering if William had the kind of enemies that made security necessary on a deserted island. William greeted Sarah like they were old friends, and they seemed really comfortable around each other. She and the others seemed to go along with whatever he said. I guessed it was natural, considering he was an extremely generous host and their biggest client. We had a fantastic afternoon out in the bay, snorkeling, paddleboarding, and just having fun in the water. There was an endless supply of free drinks and food, and later, we all sat down to a group dinner. The mood was friendly and laid back as we mingled in small groups. That's when Charlotte came over to introduce herself. She was charming, and shared stories about growing up in England. I got the sense that she came from a wealthy background, but she seemed genuinely down to earth. I wondered if she might be a model, or maybe just didn't need to work. To my surprise, she was quite flirtatious, even with Sarah standing right there. I managed to laugh it off politely, figuring she was just being overly friendly. Being pampered without the kids, having some time to unwind, and being in such a beautiful spot made for the perfect romantic night. Sarah was particularly affectionate, and our lovemaking was intense. She kept telling me how much she loved me. It was the best night we'd had in a long time. Maybe there was something to this idea of a getaway on a secluded island. I was hoping for a repeat the next morning, but Sarah was up and showered quickly, eager to head down for breakfast. Eventually, I dragged myself out of bed and caught up with her while she was deep in conversation with Jack and William. They both seemed a little tense, which made me wonder if it was work-related. Maybe William was using the weekend to push them on some business matters. The conversation broke up when I joined them, and after grabbing a quick bite, we spent another great day by the pool with the others. At dinner on Saturday, I noticed Sarah had dressed up more than usual. She looked absolutely stunning in a red satin evening dress and strappy heels. After we finished eating, William asked if we could spare a few minutes to talk. We agreed and followed him to the study, with the security guy trailing behind us. William settled into a high-backed leather chair while I sat on the couch across from him with Sarah, noticing she chose to sit a little away from me. After a long pause, William finally spoke up. "I have a proposal for you, Mike. It's a personal matter." "All right," I replied, though I was completely puzzled. William continued. "Over the past few months, I've had the pleasure of working with and getting to know Sarah. It's been an absolute joy. We get along incredibly well and have built up a strong rapport." He paused, maybe expecting some kind of reaction from me, but I was too confused to respond. The word rapport made me feel a bit uneasy. He carried on, seemingly unfazed. "As a result, I have a proposition. I'd like to spend the rest of the weekend with Sarah. Of course, I'm more than happy to compensate for the time she would have spent with you. To that end, I intend to transfer $100,000 to your joint account." I started laughing, thinking this had to be some sort of joke, and couldn't resist quipping, "Well, William, it sounds like you're being a bit stingy. Didn't Robert Redford offer $1 million for Demi Moore?" No one else laughed. William continued. "Like any negotiation, I'm open to discussing the price to ensure we both get what we want. Additionally, Charlotte would be without company, and I'd be delighted if you'd consider spending time with her." I turned to Sarah, expecting her to be amused, but she just looked worried. "It's not a joke, Mike. Williams asked me to join him, and I think we should seriously consider the offer." I felt a surge of anger and wanted to hit him. When I looked back, the security guy had moved closer. I hadn't even noticed him move. William kept talking. "I can assure you, your wife is fully on board with this. Where's the harm? We'll all have a wonderful time, and you'll walk away with a substantial sum of money." I looked at Sarah and said, "Maybe the difference in price is because Demi Moore wasn't willing." Sarah flinched at that, but wisely kept quiet. I was desperately trying to think straight, but I had to focus on my breathing, which was getting harder. I glanced at the security guy, who now looked alert and was watching my every move closely, and for good reason. I really wanted to punch William right in his smug face. "What's your name? You look like you've served in the military. Does he pull this kind of stunt often?" "Shane, sir, and I'm afraid I can't comment on that." "And if I decided to take a swing at your boss, I suppose you'd be able to take me down with your bare hands or something like that?" Shane gave a small smile. "Maybe just restrain you, sir." Turning back to William, I said, "It's a good thing you brought him along, or I'd have already laid you out." William didn't seem bothered in the slightest. "Let's not rush to conclusions, Mike. There's a lot at stake here." Sarah was the next to speak. "Mike, think about it. It's just a couple of days, and the money could change our lives forever." I was gutted. It was clear she had thought this through, and actually wanted to go through with it. "Tell me, sweetheart, did the money offer come after you two had already decided on this?" She didn't respond, so I pressed on. "And I suppose Charlotte was thrown in as a bonus. What is she, a prostitute?" William answered calmly. "Charlotte is a close friend of mine. Besides being wealthy, she's a top-tier escort and only takes on clients who intrigue her. Rest assured, you'd have an extraordinary experience with her." "So that makes them both prostitutes, then?" Sarah flinched again, but stayed silent. "Well, William, you can shove your money where the sun doesn't shine." Then Sarah finally revealed her true feelings. "It's my body, and I want to do this. It's just some fun in bed, an opportunity for us to explore with other people. William and I like each other, but it's not serious. It doesn't change how much I love you. I'm sure you and Charlotte would enjoy yourselves too." I was floored, her words slowly sinking in. "The difference, my dear wife, is that I don't want anyone else, and this is much more serious than you're making it out to be. This is betrayal, plotting behind my back. I can't trust you again, and if you're willing to do this once, why not again?" Sarah quickly responded, "You're overreacting. I'm being honest with you. It's not a secret or anything. I'm telling you up front. This is going to happen, and then I'll come back to you. All yours. If you love me, you'll let me have this one thing. Think about what we could do with that money. Holidays with the kids, everything. Don't you dare use our kids as an excuse. We don't need the money, and don't assume I'll take you back. Your honesty only counts if we agree on something together, and the only person you've made plans with is this pompous jerk. The money is just a cover. You want to do this, and you've planned it all out. I guess the money and Charlotte were thrown in because you didn't think I'd agree. Well, you were right. Even with the money, I still don't agree." Sarah kept going. "You're right. I do want to do this. I want to experience something different, something new. And yes, I am attracted to William, but it doesn't have to hurt us. I didn't want to cheat. And you think this is any better? You've already made your choice, even dressed up for him. Don't fight this, babe. You wouldn't like the outcome." "What the hell do you mean by that?" "Well, you wouldn't come out of it well. If you tried to fight this or go for a divorce, you'd lose everything. The house, the kids, even your job might be in jeopardy. And there's no need for any of that. So just accept it. It'll be much easier. I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, I love you, and only you." I had to get out of there. I could hardly breathe, and if I stayed, I was going to lose it. I stood up, feeling shaky, and half stumbled toward the door. I heard Sarah calling my name, but I kept walking. As I crossed the hall, Charlotte approached and gave me a hug, telling me everything was going to be okay. I turned on her. "And what are you supposed to be, the damn consolation prize?" She walked away with her head held high. I kept moving, eventually making it outside and halfway across the courtyard, but I wasn't feeling well. I heard footsteps behind me, and was disappointed to see it was Shane, not Sarah. "Listen, Shane, you really need to back off." "I'd like to, mate, but I have to make sure you're not going to do anything reckless, like, got any ideas? Because I'm fresh out." "Mike, you don't look too good. Just sit down against the wall, pull your knees up, and focus on taking long, slow breaths." I felt weak and didn't have the energy to argue. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a few minutes before I started to calm down. I noticed Shane sitting next to me. "Thanks, I guess. Not sure what the hell that was. Maybe anxiety or a panic attack." "You were pretty pale, but you're looking a bit better now," Shane said. "Speaking of bad ideas, is there any way I can get off this damn island?" Shane replied calmly, "There's no way off tonight. No boats, and the plane and pilot are off on another charter. You might be able to radio for help, but an unfaithful wife doesn't exactly count as an emergency." "Well, I'm glad you see her as unfaithful. She doesn't seem to grasp that concept, and I was starting to doubt myself. What the hell am I supposed to do? I can't even knock him out because of you." "Yeah, sorry about that. I wish I could look the other way, but I'd never get work again," Shane continued. "Look, think about what you're going to do and come up with a plan. Whatever you decide can wait until Monday. It's like in the military. Formulate a strategy, sit tight, and don't tip them off. The problem is, I have no clue what I'm going to do. They seem to have thought of everything, and now I'm stuck here, suffering through tomorrow and Monday while you play babysitter." After a long pause, Shane suggested, "There's a supply boat that comes in early Monday morning. You could get on that if you want to avoid the plane ride home with everyone else. They can't stop you. No one, myself included, wants to be charged with kidnapping or unlawful imprisonment. I might even join you. This job is losing its appeal. I don't like being on the wrong side, even if it pays well." "Okay, that helps. I just need to make it through tomorrow. How about we hike around the island in the morning? Keep you away from all the drama. And maybe you should consider Charlotte. She's a good person, and honestly, you don't have much to lose now. For tonight, you can sleep in one of the cabanas if you don't want to go back inside. No, our room's probably empty. I'll go back there. You never know, she might change her mind. She didn't, of course, but surprisingly, I did manage to sleep, probably out of sheer exhaustion. The next morning, I changed into some sports gear and hurried downstairs, hoping to avoid everyone and head out with Shane. No such luck. As soon as I entered the dining room, the chatter died down. I grabbed some fruit for a quick bite. There were murmurs around the room. I overheard comments like, "It'll be fine, it's nothing, and she'll come back." Then John Cousins, our finance director, and his wife came over. "Listen, Mike, we've all been there. Just let it happen. It's nothing personal. He sees other wives but moves on, and he's very generous." As he said it, I noticed his wife's neck turn red. Just then, Sarah and William made their entrance. She looked absolutely thrilled with herself, glowing, if I had to describe it, until she saw me. Her smile faded, and she let go of the jerk's hand, walking over as if she was going to kiss or hug me. I held her back at arm's length and glanced around. "You, Mike," I thought to myself. What an absolute idiot. Everyone knew what was going to happen before this weekend even started. I've been such a fool. I turned to leave, but Sarah started talking. "Please stay, Mike. We can hang out with the group and have another good day together." I looked around, and all eyes were on me, some filled with anticipation, others clearly amused by the whole situation. "Nope, he paid for you, so he can keep you. But before I go, I've got something to say to everyone here. It seems like this weekend has been in the works for a while, and you all knew, so it's only fair you hear me out." The group looked shocked, exchanging nervous glances with each other. "Jack, Karen, I never would have come to this weekend if it weren't for you two. It never crossed my mind that you'd be involved in something so disgusting. You knew exactly what was going on and just went along with it, like some sort of sick fan club. I hope you got a thrill out of blindsiding me." I could see them all starting to shift uncomfortably. This clearly wasn't part of their plan. "I actually thought we were friends. You made me feel welcome just to set me up. And you're wrong, William. This is very personal. So thanks for your role in destroying my marriage. The fact that you're willing to use my kids as leverage is absolutely revolting. I don't let anyone threaten my kids." Sarah interrupted. "You're overreacting. It was just a fun time in bed, a one-time adventure. It doesn't change anything between us. I told you I love—" I cut her off. "Ah, there it is. The first phase of the defense. It's nothing, really. I know you've planned out how I'd react with the help of Captain Smug over there, so let's see. What did you expect me to say? Phase A is where we stay here, and you try to get me used to what happened, make it seem normal before we go home. Combine that with you and your friends downplaying it as no big deal. They've already started that narrative for you. No doubt you think I shouldn't overreact, shouldn't be upset, shouldn't act childish about it. I should grow up. It's just my ego and pride, right? Of course, you know that won't work, but it's all part of softening me up. So, on to Phase B. After the weekend, you let me reclaim you. We'll have love, lots of it. Maybe even try new things. We'll benefit from your little liaison and be better than ever. I bet you even discussed how you'd need to seduce me, making sure I don't dwell on my feelings of betrayal. After all, darling." Sarah glanced nervously at William. That comment seemed to hit home. "And let's not forget, we'll have the money he paid for you. We can spend that on taking the kids to Disneyland and meeting Mickey Mouse." A few of them actually winced at that. "And if we're still struggling, we move on to Phase C. You already planted that seed last night. If I really loved you, I'd let you have this one thing. You've been a great wife for 15 years. It's just one night something for you." Yeah, maybe that would start to weaken my resolve. But what do I get after 15 years of being devoted to you? Treated like garbage, that's what. You knew I would never agree, so you railroaded me, showing a complete lack of respect. So that plan's not going to cut it. Now you're worried. Maybe you should give me time to cool off, a week or two. Find me drowning my sorrows in a bar somewhere and then come begging for forgiveness. That's Phase D. You're really sorry. You didn't know it would hurt me so much, and you never would have done it if you had realized. You love me. You're crying, begging, the whole works. I'll admit, you might have had a shot with that one, but then you walked in, hand in hand with him in front of everyone, looking so damn pleased with yourself. It cements in my mind that there isn't any real guilt or regret, just contempt and a desire to humiliate me. Phase D isn't going to work out for you. So, finally, there's the fallback plan. Phase E, threats. You'll take all the money in the house and turn the kids against me. You've already hinted I could lose my job. William will pay for the best lawyers. I'll end up sad, poor, and alone. You might even threaten to move in with him and live happily ever after with our kids. William's head shot up so fast I almost laughed. Oh, look at that! Seems like lover boy isn't too thrilled about the kids, huh, Sarah? Sarah finally found her voice. This really isn't such a big deal, she began. Why don't we just calm down and give ourselves some time to think? That's Phase A, Sarah. We've already gone over that, I replied flatly. So why don't we cut to the chase and get straight to the bottom line? That's what I was thinking about last night, and I've come to the conclusion that everyone, including the kids, would be better off if we got a divorce. It's a lot healthier than living in a miserable home. You can't be happy if you're pulling this kind of crap, and I'm sure as hell not happy. You can try to keep me from seeing the kids, but you know I'm a good father and good for them. They're old enough to understand what's going on. I doubt your folks and friends will back you up. Not once they know what you've done. And as for the money, that was always your concern, not mine. The room fell into stunned silence, everyone staring at me like a bunch of goldfish. Any of you geniuses have any more advice? Did I miss anything? No, I didn't think so. Oh, and one more thing. Jack, you can shove your job. I'll see you in court for that constructive dismissal case. Making my job dependent on a client loving my wife seems like a pretty solid case to me. With that, I stormed out. The silence was deafening, broken only by Shane, who, as always, trailed behind me. Shane chuckled. Way to go. I see you really took that advice about keeping the plan to yourself to heart, huh? I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, I guess I kind of blew that idea. Shane laughed heartily. Good thing you stayed a civilian. You would have never made it in the military. Anyway, let's get going. Shane grabbed a backpack and set off up the coast at a brisk pace. A mile in, I was already struggling to keep up and starting to question if this was a mistake. He shouted something about physical torture being great for distracting you from mental torture. My burning muscles and lungs seemed to agree. The scenery was stunning, and Shane was good company, alternating between asking about me and sharing hilarious stories from his time in the British military. We were out for hours, trekking along the northern coast, and then climbing to the island's highest point in the middle. Just as I caught my breath, Shane casually suggested we jog back, saying it was all downhill. I struggled to keep pace, wondering if he was either helping or tormenting me, depending on how you looked at it. By noon, we made it back, exhausted. I gasped to Shane that I'd thought I was fit before today. He, barely out of breath, generously reassured me, mentioning he'd been a PT instructor in the forces. Dragging myself back to my room, I found it empty and wondered if Sarah was furthering her transaction with William. After a quick shower and feeling ravenous, I headed to the dining room, only to be disheartened by the sight of William and Sarah already there. Shane, ever vigilant, hovered nearby, dressed sharply in a suit that screamed readiness. William, with his usual air of confidence, began, "Mike, my dear fellow, I feel we've gotten off on the wrong foot, and I sincerely apologize. I've never had this issue with my arrangements before, and I certainly don't intend to jeopardize your marriage." "Too late. You already have," I shot back, not holding back the anger in my voice. "I wish to withdraw my request to spend tonight with your wife and increase the compensation," William continued, trying to salvage the situation. With that, he handed me a piece of paper. I unfolded it to find a check for £250,000. I glanced at Sarah, who looked like she was about to cry. Unable to resist, I quipped, "You must have been really impressive to earn that much, babe." Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "That's not what this is about. We made a terrible mistake, and we're trying to fix it. William has been a perfect gentleman and is genuinely concerned about how you've reacted. I couldn't help but laugh. Your definition of a perfect gentleman seems pretty loose. Did he at least say thank you after your interesting time in bed? Don't be sarcastic, Mike, Sarah snapped. This was a misunderstanding on our part. We misjudged how you would take it. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for both of us. You should be grateful. I made a sacrifice to secure a better life for you and the kids. A misunderstanding? I scoffed. I made my feelings about your plan perfectly clear. But you both went ahead anyway, only stopping after you got what you wanted. Well, you've miscalculated this time too. With that, I tore up the check. I just saved you from being an easy target, sweetheart. That only leaves the part about being a cheating spouse, but I'm not sure that's fixable. This time, Sarah's tears flowed freely. I turned to William, my voice dripping with disbelief. Why do you do this? Is it about control or the thrill of taking someone else's wife? Either way, it just makes you a sad excuse for a man. You're what, 48? Yet you act like a child, stealing toys just because you can. Don't you have anything more meaningful to focus on? William chuckled in response. I run an international corporation and contribute millions to charity. I've got plenty to keep me busy. From what I dug up last night, you inherited that corporation, and under your watch, it's been shrinking. And as for charities, attending galas and fundraisers must be such a burden. When was the last time you actually got your hands dirty and genuinely helped someone? I doubt you've got it in you. You're too self-absorbed, too busy playing games with people's lives. Planning this weekend so everyone would know. Humiliation must be what gets you off. I'm sorry, Sarah, but it wasn't all about desire for you. You're just another notch on his belt. Why don't you try growing up, forming a real connection with someone, putting your wealth to good use, and stop being a complete jerk? Later, I found Charlotte on the beach, feeling a bit of relief at finding someone who seemed to get it. I'm sorry about last night, I began. Charlotte looked up from her book, her smile warm and genuine. There's absolutely no need, she interrupted. I was led to believe you'd accept the offer. If I'd known, I would never have approached you. Your reaction was perfectly understandable, and your speech at breakfast was absolutely brilliant. I couldn't agree more. When you left, Sarah broke down in tears, and I've never seen William look so embarrassed. I loved every minute of it. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't say that, given what you're going through. I chuckled despite myself. No need to apologize. It's actually refreshing to hear someone being honest about it. Charlotte nodded, her expression softening. I've known William for a while now. He's not an easy man to deal with, and he often gets away with far too much. I admire your courage for standing up to him. Thank you, I replied sincerely. It hasn't been easy, but I'm starting to see things more clearly now. If there's anything I can do to help, Charlotte offered, please let me know. I can't undo what's happened, but I can certainly be a friend. I appreciate that, I said, feeling a genuine warmth toward her. Just having someone to talk to who understands makes a big difference. We sat together for a while longer, talking about lighter topics and soaking in the peacefulness of the beach. It was a much-needed break from the chaos of the past few days, and Charlotte's presence brought a sense of calm that I'd been craving. Thanks. I'm kind of relieved that something seems to be getting through. I'm so tired of being told it's nothing. Charlotte nodded knowingly. You realize William has no clue what to do with you. He's never been turned down before and isn't used to dealing with people who have morals. Has he offered you more money yet? Yeah, just before I came down, $250,000. Charlotte sighed. What an idiot. I told him not to, but he's used to just paying whatever it takes to get what he wants. It's going to cost him in business as well as personally. Charlotte turned out to be easy to talk to, and she listened attentively as I opened up about my marriage and the kids. She was clearly intelligent and well-educated. She was surprised that Sarah had done this, assuming there must have been some unhappiness or an agreement between us to have an open marriage. I mused aloud. No, just a surprise ambush. She seems completely infatuated with the guy. He has that effect on women, Charlotte remarked. It's all very charming, but there's not much depth behind it, if you know what I mean. We continued chatting, and as the conversation flowed, I found myself feeling a bit better. I guess you really do love her. The way you reacted to the offers and at breakfast, it must be heartbreaking for you, Charlotte observed gently. I managed a shrug. I'm sorry to have had any part in it. Not your fault. I've just got to get through one more night, and then maybe I can escape. Charlotte smiled again, and her smile was becoming more and more distracting. Well, maybe I can help with that. They were surprised when I showed up for dinner. Sarah was no longer sitting next to William. It was a fairly normal dinner, though I ignored all of Sarah's attempts at small talk. When she asked if I wanted to have an early night, I smiled pleasantly and told her I had other plans. She looked puzzled, and that confusion only deepened as Charlotte strolled around the table and linked arms with me as I stood. We left the room together. We walked down to the cabanas on the beach. Initially, the plan was just to leave together and give Sarah a taste of her own medicine, but Charlotte felt good in my arms, really good, and as we kissed, at least some of the frustrations of the last 24 hours melted away. I thought about holding on to the moral high ground, about doing what was right, but then I looked at her. Well, I guess Sarah wanted me to be more flexible, and as far as I was concerned, our marriage vows had already been broken by her. I had an incredible night with Charlotte. It wasn't just her beauty. She had a calm, sensual quality. Every move was so precise and perfectly timed. She truly was a master of her craft. Surprisingly, I didn't think about Sarah, nor did I feel guilty. The searing, painful image of Sarah with William was enough to wipe away any trace of remorse. When I left the island, I made good time, catching the supply boat, a taxi to the airport, and then a routine flight back home. I picked up the kids and did my best to catch up on their weekend activities. I came up with a vague story about their mom and me having a disagreement, but assured them we'd work things out. Just as I was suggesting we eat out, Sarah stumbled into the house, dragging our heavy suitcase behind her. The kids ran upstairs, shouting, "Hi, Mom!" Lucy smiled. "Eating out sounds like a good idea. Give me a few minutes, and I'll get ready." "I'd rather you didn't, Sarah," I replied, remembering her earlier comments. "I'm not sure how much time I'll have with them, so I think it's better if it's just us tonight." Sarah's reflections. There was an instant connection when I first met William. He seemed so dashing, confident, powerful, and charming, almost like a character from an old movie. But it was strange how, when I was back in Mike's presence, William didn't seem to embody any of those qualities. Our flirting escalated into lunches and then dinners. It was thrilling, and I felt a rush of excitement when he kissed me goodnight after dinner. I almost melted, but I was determined not to cheat and told him so. William mentioned that some of his relationships were open, and I started wondering if Mike might be open to that. When William proposed the arrangement, I thought the money would make it all worthwhile. Jack was supportive, and we began making plans for the weekend. The weekend started off wonderfully. I had such a great time with Mike that I almost backed out of the entire plan. If only I had. William reassured me that everything would be fine and told me to relax. Both he and Jack predicted that Mike would reject the idea, but advised me to give him some time to calm down. However, Mike's reaction was nothing like we expected or planned for. The biggest shock was how visibly upset he was. I wanted to go after him, but William kept assuring me that everything would work out. He had arranged for Charlotte to spend time with Mike, so when Mike didn't return, I assumed he was with her. I felt a sense of relief, and after months of anticipation, I was eager to be with William. The moment he kissed me, I knew I was going through with it. He led me to his bedroom, undressing me with such care that I felt incredibly special. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling disoriented, thinking I was lying next to Mike, only to be shocked by the presence of someone else. Guilt washed over me as I wondered where Mike was and how he was feeling. My thoughts must have disturbed William, who woke up and kissed me, quickly erasing my guilt as he made love to me once more. It had been everything I had hoped for, and I was elated. I kissed William gratefully, thanking him for a wonderful night. Holding his hand, we went downstairs and entered the dining room, excited for another night together. But then I saw Mike, and everything came crashing down. panic surged within me as Mike erupted. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. It was clear he hadn't been with Charlotte. Even without that, I expected him to be upset, maybe storm off, but I hadn't anticipated this level of anger. His cold fury terrified me the most. Mike was too composed, too logical about it all. He dismantled every argument I had rehearsed with William, making them sound weak and hollow, even to my own ears. I tried to stand my ground, but I knew I was failing miserably. After Mike left, I broke down, crying uncontrollably. For the first time, William seemed uncertain. When I finally pulled myself together and tried to find Mike, he was nowhere to be found. That's when Jack and William suggested calling off everything, offering even more money to try and salvage the situation. Later that day, when we offered Mike the extra money, I saw a remarkable change. William's presence seemed to shrink, his once commanding authority now crumbling. I had believed William's assurances that our escapade wouldn't permanently damage my marriage. But now that plan was in ruins, and uncertainty loomed over everything. Frustrated and feeling irrational, I blurted out that I might stay on the island longer and continue having fun, only to be stunned by Jack's calm, yet cutting response. "Don't be foolish, Sarah. If you want even a slim chance of salvaging your marriage, you need to beg for forgiveness. Be honest and sincere, because Mike isn't someone who will easily change his mind." Honestly, I can't disagree with a word he said at breakfast. I was even more shocked when Jack informed William that they wouldn't be returning. He stressed that Mike was a decent man who didn't deserve any of the trouble we'd caused, and urged William to take his advice and consider growing up. I was stunned when Mike showed up for dinner that evening, but he ignored all my attempts to talk to him. Seeing him leave with Charlotte left me devastated. I wanted to chase after him, but what could I possibly say? I had practically encouraged him to do just that, rationalizing our fling as nothing serious throughout the entire trip. Feeling a mix of anger and betrayal, I couldn't help but reflect on how I had done even worse to Mike with my actions, meticulously planned and in full view of everyone. Perhaps I deserved this. Maybe our mutual infidelity could somehow salvage our relationship. The plane ride back home without Mike made the reality of how much trouble my marriage was in hit hard. He had managed to leave the island before us, and I hadn't spoken to him properly since before everything happened. The weight of my actions began to settle in, and guilt washed over me in waves. I tried to console myself with thoughts of the money. After all, who in their right mind would turn down such a sum? But my tears, which had been constant, turned into uncontrollable sobs, bordering on hysteria. Jack and Karen grew increasingly concerned for my well-being. When we returned home, Mike was there, but he refused my offer to dine out with him and the kids. I barely held myself together until they left, after which I collapsed into another round of tears. Being excluded from the meal felt like a grim sign of what was to come. Once I managed to calm down, I agonized over what to say to Mike when he returned. Everything I thought of sounded like what he had already expressed, and I felt too ashamed to seek advice from my mother or friends. When we finally got home, the kids did what they always did, retreated to their rooms, absorbed in their video games and phones. I found myself standing in the kitchen staring at Mike. He seemed like a complete stranger to me. "Can we talk properly?" I asked softly, almost whispering. Mike shrugged, clearly reluctant, but resigned to the inevitable conversation. "We need to have this conversation sooner or later, so why drag it out?" "I'm sorry, Mike," I began, my voice trembling. "I promised you it was a one-time thing, and I'll be yours just as faithfully as I was before the weekend. I did it for the money. It could change our lives as a family. I did it for us." "You did it for yourself," he replied, his voice steady but laden with disappointment. "We were fine. Money wasn't an issue. You couldn't wait to jump into his bed. Must have been thrilling, wined, dined, and loved. All in all, everyone had a good time." "You're overreacting. It doesn't have to mean anything," I insisted defensively, desperate for him to see it the way I did. "You really should skip phase A, Sarah. It's nonsense, and you know it," Mike shot back, his voice tinged with bitterness. "This wasn't a one-off accidental, interesting time in bed. It was a calculated betrayal, arrogant, selfish, all the traits I despise, and right now, I very much hate you." "So you did the same thing with that tart?" I countered, trying to deflect. No, I didn't, Mike replied sharply. I sought revenge because nothing seemed to be getting through to you. You couldn't pull your head out of your own mess long enough to see the impact on me. I would have never considered it if I had a faithful wife. And I hope it hurt, really hurt. So you might get a small taste of how I feel. But unlike you, I didn't plan it out in advance. And I didn't do it with everyone else knowing, making a complete fool of me. He paused, his eyes narrowing as he studied my reaction. Speaking of which, how long did your little secret plan take to put in place? And was that your first time with him? My eyes widened at his question, and I realized he deserved a genuine and honest response. It was the first time, I began slowly, my voice tinged with guilt and explanation. We had lunches together, and I knew he was interested in me. I suppose Jack and Karen were testing the waters, subtly asking if I was interested. The four of us had dinner, and for the first time in my marriage, I found another man arousing. His confidence was intoxicating. I knew it was wrong, and I struggled to resist, but I managed to avoid an affair. Then William suggested bringing up the idea of an open relationship with you, maybe even discussing swapping partners. I continued, my voice fraught with remorse. We briefly discussed it one night, and it was clear you wouldn't agree to that. Then he proposed the weekend plan, and I thought the promise of money would justify it all to you. As the trip approached, we grew anxious, and William suggested inviting Charlotte to reassure you of our intentions. I wasn't keen on that idea, but by then, I just wanted it all to happen. I thought even if you didn't fully approve, we could recover from it. Then you dismantled all those ideas so effectively over breakfast, and I began to realize the full impact of what I had done. Her confession hung heavy in the air, the silence that followed speaking volumes about the damage done and the uncertain road ahead. Was it worth it? Mike asked, his voice steady but carrying a quiet storm. Sarah hesitated before responding, her eyes betraying a mix of regret and apprehension. No, of course not. I got so wrapped up in him, in what he said. I never meant to hurt you. Ah, straight to phase D, unintentional hurt, Mike retorted bitterly. But you did enjoy it, didn't you? It was written all over you, the way you floated into breakfast. Now you're just telling me what you think I want to hear. Sarah's shoulders slumped slightly, her admission coming reluctantly. Sorry. The honest answer is yes, I enjoyed it. He was good. Not bigger or better, just different. It was exciting, new, thrilling. I was attracted to him. He was experienced, knew what he was doing. But it was a one-off. Please don't throw us away. Don't break up our family for a one-time thing. I couldn't help but let out a rueful chuckle. Funny. That's exactly how I'd describe what you've already done. Broken up our family for a one-time thing. This is all on you, not me. Sarah's face fell, the weight of her actions settling heavily between us. The air hung thick with the realization of the irreparable damage and the uncertain future that lay ahead. You're right, she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. This is all my fault. I am so very sorry. I love you with all my heart. Not quite all of it, though, is it? You gave some of it to him. Or even if you claim you didn't, your love still wasn't enough to keep you faithful to me. How can I ever trust you again? I was so gullible because it never even crossed my mind that you were capable of doing what you did. I guess I don't really know you. I can barely stand to look at you, let alone pretend this didn't happen. Sarah recoiled in shock, her eyes wide with anguish. You can't possibly mean that. You love me. I know you do. I never thought I could lose you. No. You just thought about yourself and your desires. Not me and not the kids. Sometimes love isn't enough. I replied sharply, struggling to contain the anger welling inside me. Taking a deep breath to calm myself, I continued after a long pause. Listen, Sarah, even if we stayed together and tried to move past this, it would never be the same. You obliterated the trust and the bond we had with each other. Remember, we promised to look after each other and the kids above everything else. We swore to protect each other from pain. I never, ever expected you to be the one causing it. Mike, I love you. I made a huge mistake and would do anything to take it back. This can't mean us getting a divorce, Sarah pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. You tore my heart out and threatened me to get your way. You can't do that to someone you truly love, I countered, my tone filled with a mix of hurt and resignation. Sarah stared at me, stunned and at a loss for words. We need to talk about the kids, I continued, breaking the heavy silence. I think they're better off in split families rather than dysfunctional ones, so divorce is the better option from that point of view. I know you would likely get custody, but don't try to keep me from seeing them. It'll be better for you too. They listen to me. You're not very good at setting boundaries, I added with a frown, recognizing the irony in my words. And they're already pushing against you. It would be better for all of us if we both stay in their lives. Sarah shrugged, unable to form a coherent response. Seriously, Sarah, whatever happens, don't keep me from seeing our kids. Don't alienate me. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm good for them, and I love them to bits. You haven't seen me angry yet. I'll fight you to the bitter end, waste all of our money on lawyers, and we'll destroy each other in the process. She nodded solemnly. I would never do that. You're a great dad, and they do need you. They'll want you to keep taking them on trips and supporting them in their sports clubs. I turned to face her, surprised by her sincerity in that moment. It was the first time I felt she wasn't trying to manipulate me or excuse her actions. Be careful, Sarah. You're letting go of Phase D, I said, trying to inject a bit of humor into the tense situation. But seriously, you know who I am. Why do it? The only thing I can think is that, deep down, you wanted us to break up. God, never that, Sarah uttered urgently, her voice filled with regret. There's no excuse. I got selfish, convinced myself I could have something extra. I thought one way or another I'd be able to keep you. Why didn't you stop me that night? Why did you just leave? I couldn't breathe and had to get out. But then, it didn't seem to make much difference, I replied, my voice heavy with resignation. The fact that you wanted another guy and were willing to do anything to get it meant I'd already lost you. That conversation killed us long before you ended up in his bed. Maybe it was over when you started planning it. You spent weeks talking to him and setting it up. Letting you go and not forcing you to stop makes it easier to end things. There's no going back now. And so began the unraveling of our marriage, shattered in less than 4 days. Thankfully, we managed to divorce without the need for counseling. Sarah didn't seem inclined to examine her actions. It's a shame, really. I had hoped professional help might shed some light on her delusions. She did keep one promise. We ended up sharing custody of the kids fairly evenly. To her credit, she admitted to them that everything was her fault without getting into the ugly details. They were old enough to understand what was going on and often made their own decisions about where they wanted to stay. At that age, parents become little more than glorified taxi drivers and moneylenders. Biased as I may be, I think they're wonderful kids who handled the breakup remarkably well. Children can be incredibly resilient. In the divorce settlement, Sarah was allowed to keep our house until the kids reached adulthood, after which she could either sell it or buy me out. That was what I wanted for the sake of the children, to ensure they stayed in the same school. Fortunately, doing the right thing paid off. By the time the kids headed off to college, property prices had skyrocketed. Sarah had to buy me out, which turned out to be the best investment I ever made. How did she manage to afford it? Well, we kept the £250,000 and split it in the divorce. Much like my time with Charlotte, I couldn't maintain the moral high ground. I'm a practical guy, and it seemed like a small price compared to the cost of a marriage and what had once been a happy life. After quitting my job and receiving compensation to avoid an embarrassing employment tribunal, I started my own web design business. Despite Sarah's attempts to reconcile, I wasn't interested. So, was ending things the right decision? It was messy, and there were no clear winners, but the dire threats and consequences I initially feared never came to pass. I knew I would never forget or forgive that night. There's something to be said about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and like the person staring back.